This episode is going to be about technology, and in particular, Britain's current cultural norm of viewing technology and any technological advancement that comes along as inherently good and accepting it without any question. When you think about it, this is quite an extreme cultural norm to have. It's quite an extreme position to just accept any technological advancement as though it is just good straight off the bat without thinking about what its negatives could potentially be and weighing up the benefits and the negatives and then making an informed choice about whether you want to adopt this technology. The best example I can give of a technology that became adopted extremely quickly in the UK is the television. The first broadcast on British television was in 1936. By 1956, 36% of UK households had at least one television. By 2020, that had risen to 95%. So in a period of 84 years, the UK practically ubiquitously adopts the television as a piece of technology that is in every single home in this country. Clearly, the rate of adoption of technology has been rapid in that instance, and it's understandable. We've all experienced it when a new gadget comes along or a new piece of technology that we're all extremely excited by. I remember when I was in high school and the Sony PSP was released for the first time, the PlayStation Portable. And there was a child in the yard who had a PSP for the first time. And all of us crowded around and watched as he played a game with one of the little cartridges that clicked into the back. The PSP wasn't to last very long. I think it survived about a decade, and it never became a mainstay. It was something that faded out and was superseded by other technologies. But I remember the glee and the excitement that the technology brought along with it when we first had it, and we all thought that this would just carry on advancing and it was leading us somewhere excellent because we all thought games were good at that point in time as children, and we spent a lot of time on them. So it's easy to see and to connotate all technological advancement with a sense of moving forward and to see it as something as that we're progressing as a culture and that this is great for us, that we are breaking boundaries and moving forward with our new technological advancements. And if we just accept them and we find a way to utilize them, that will be great for us all. I understand it. It's a powerful idea, and it's a powerful feeling that can then be very tempting to us all. But what I want to say is that it's equally important to look at the negatives of technology and not to get swept away in this feeling of excitement and to lose all rationality and reason and just adopt everything straight off the bat without questioning whether this is actually good for us. We have to be more balanced as a culture and weigh up the pros and cons. I'm not talking about this becoming an extreme. It's just, I think we need more balance. I think we're already in an extreme of adopting things too quickly, and we need to kind of draw back a little bit and be more balanced about what we decide and what we choose. Seeing as I talked about television earlier on, I think this is where I will stay for my example and my evaluation, because I'm going to look at the pros and cons of television and explain why I think that the cons of television potentially outweigh the positives. The television is now, as I said, in 95% of UK homes. That's at least one television in 95% of UK homes. What is the home? The home is the private sphere. It's the place where the speed and tumult of the modern world can be shut out at the end of a day. When you come home from a shift, you can shut your door and lock it, and the outside world and its busyness and its noise and its demanding level of energy is shut out and stopped. And you can retire to a private space and relax and find peace and rest and recharge your batteries a little bit. The home is also a place to nurture children. It's a place where you can manage what they are exposed to. It's a place where they can then grow and feel safe and secure in a place that offers them a space to kind of grow in their initial years before they're ready to go out on their own and face the wider world and all of the stress and the troubles that can come in life. It's the first community that we live in. It's the first community we experience as children. It's where we learn the give and take of life and how to interact with other people in a shared space so that we moderate our behavior and don't just think solely as individuals and don't just act purely on self-interest. We have to live alongside one another. We have to moderate ourselves and behave in a way that is agreeable to everyone around us so that we can cooperate and move towards shared goals. And as a child, this is your first experience of such a community. It's almost like your little test before you go out into the world. Will you be able to develop the character and virtues required in this first community before you transcend to become part of wider society? And so the home then is obviously extremely important if you think about it as a fortress in which you can shut out the outside world and gain some peace and relaxation, but also as a place where children grow really, and it's their formation, their years of formation are spent inside the home, and it's what will determine how they turn out in later life to some extent. The relationships that are built in the home are also some of the most important that you can build in a lifetime. Your relationship with your father and your mother and your brothers and sisters might be the relationships that are the strongest you have, and you might be able to build upon those relationships and utilize those relationships in really difficult times, even if it's just memories. If you have a great memory of your childhood, you look back upon childhood with absolute fondness. When you're in a difficult period in your life, you might be able to draw on those memories and those experiences as almost like a well to draw from, as of goodness in a time of difficulty and darkness. And so the family time, the private sphere, the home, might help you deal with the suffering that life will throw at you later on. So I think that the family is properly understood as something sacred, as something that is like a fortress that you should protect and should build in a way that is the most ideal that you can make it for yourselves and also any children you might have. So where does technology and television come into this? Why am I interested in television? Well, now 95% of televisions, 95% of UK households, have televisions in their homes. But television can intrude on the fortress of the private sphere. When you put television into a house, you are inviting the outside world into the prior peace and stability of the private world. You go from turning your house from somewhere where you can shut out the outside world to somewhere where it is being broadcast into your house at an unbelievable rate. The noise of it, the invasion of sound and images into your private fortress. This is particularly true when you think about 24/7 news media and the negative images and videos that are just being beamed out at a constant level all the time, showing the worst excesses of the human species being beamed into your household. Prior to this, you would have had a quiet household where your children were growing in safety and security, which has now been invaded by this highly negative stream of images and videos from the outside world. That will have an effect on your children, and it will encourage them to feel fear and at the outside world, and it will inhibit the time that they have to grow and develop their character and virtues and to grow into adults, because it's taking the time that they should have had to interact with other people within their first community and to develop their potential by interacting with other people through the action of socialization. It's taking away that time and instead putting them in front of a box, which is just beaming out all of the worst things human beings have done and propelling fear and anger and violence into their minds. That will have an effect on them, and it will be a negative effect. It's something that has infiltrated your fortress of a private sphere, and it's something that you should think about. Not only this, though, it's also individualizing by its very nature and isolating. I've talked about how the home can be a place where children are in their first community and they learn how to interact with other people and fulfill their potential and grow as people by talking to others and finding out what's acceptable, what they think, how to talk, how to interact with others in a good manner. But a TV is isolating. It's a one-on-one relationship in which you sit in front of a television and the person who created the television program, whose motives for creating that program you do not know, gets to beam their image and video of the world into your mind without any defense or you critiquing what that image and video is about. You're then sat on your own. Even if you're sat with other people watching the same program, you're just completely absorbed on your own in that program. And you're watching these images that are basically being beamed into your mind without you putting up much of a fight, basically. It's a pastime television that is very isolating. It encourages you to withdraw into your own world and to spend time in entertainment and indulgence in the television and the things that they show. What this will mean is that you stop paying attention to the shared space that you live in the house, the place that is your community and your society, basically. You won't spend as much time with your loved ones, the people who actually matter in your life, the people who give your life kind of meaning and sustenance. Instead of spending time with them, you're just sat in front of a TV. It's not uncommon now to see households where a father will sit in the front room watching one program, the mother will sit in the second room watching a different program, and then the children upstairs on tablets or laptops or video games watching other things or playing games. So what was primarily the family and the fortress of the family in which the family could shut out the outside world and grow in a community has now just become isolated individuals living side by side, watching television, which beams into their minds wholly negative information and images that shape who they are as people, rather than being shaped by their interactions with real people in the real world and people who actually care about them and have their best interests at heart. That's a problem. That's a big problem. It's something we've not really considered properly because television is a new-ish technology. It's only been around for under 100 years. So we haven't had time to sit and really think about the ways in which it's changed us as a society and the way it's changed the way we interact with the people we know and care about. If you think about it now, what would have been the prior social space outside of the home, in the local sphere, that has been changed probably by television, because now people come home from work and they shut out the outside world and just sit in front of a television. And they don't speak to their neighbors as much. They don't interact in the local sphere because everyone is just at home. They're either watching the television or they've got the smartphone on, and they're not actually building any interactions with the people around them or building any local organizations that provide sustenance sustenance in a mental and physical sense. One of the other things it's doing as well, and this is particularly a news media here, is a paradox has developed where people are becoming intensely worried about the global sphere because they're watching global news media and all of the events that are happening around the world, and they're becoming extremely anxious and irritated and fearful about global news and concerned about global events. But at the same time, they're becoming increasingly lonely and isolated because they're effectively just on their own watching these events in an isolated manner with no power or control over anything that happens. And they're being encouraged to feel this fear and anger and irritability about these things that they can't really do anything about. The paradox is that as you become more globally aware, you become more isolated and alone. In the past, you would have paid attention to your local space and you would have partook in the local and the social activities in the local space and tried to make a difference there and tried to be concerned about things that were happening around you, because that's where you can actually make change and you can actually do something, and that's where you should start. But the television encourages us not to think in that way. It's kind of training us to think in a bigger kind of way and to be concerned about things that happen thousands of miles away that literally we can do nothing about. That's another way that it's changed the way that we act and the way that we think about the world around us. And is that actually beneficial to us as individuals or to our local space? If you think about it in your life, and your life is short, all the hours that you spent watching television, could you have spent those in the local community helping people around you or building something interesting? And what has the world lost because you haven't done that? Because instead you've been watching television. Is that good for us? I don't think so. Ultimately, the effect of all this is that the television basically invades the private sphere, and the private sphere stops being this space where you can gain peace and relaxation, which we all need because we go out and we work long hours now. The expectations of work keep going up. We're expected to do more and more for the same pay. We're expected to work at harder hours. We're expected to devote more time to our jobs. And so when we come home, the home sphere is no longer a place of relaxation and peace, because it's also been invaded by this mad and manic world outside that is constantly working, because the television is the outside world being implanted into your home, which robs it of peace. I haven't even mentioned here television shows, because television shows aren't different in a way. Well, they are different, sorry. It's news media tends to encourage fear and anger and irritability, because that's what sells and that's what keeps people hooked into the programs that they're watching. It's what is entertaining and interesting about what they're watching, and that's what keeps you going back to the news media channels. But television is slightly different in that television programs will utilize drama and emotions of a different sort, but it's highly emotive still. It might be sadness or thrill or drama or even anger still, and fear to an extent. But these programs will encourage the emotive in order to keep you watching the television program. A lot of the soaps are melodramatic for that purpose. They're there to make you feel in a certain way, to keep you interested. The drama of some of these storylines where somebody betrays somebody else is what keeps you interested, because it's shocking. And so we end up with a society where we have people sat in TV, watching TV at home and TV shows where they're just being constantly emotionally stimulated. We're not being encouraged to think about things and to think about and utilize our reason. We're being constantly entreated to dwell in emotions and be in an emotional state where we operate on our emotions. Also, children then who grow up in this space are the same, and they might be watching news media and the fear that's being pumped out, and they're encouraged to be fearful all the time. They're encouraged to be fearful about global events, about the world outside them, and to take responsibility for these huge things that are outside their control, because they're being motivated by fear. So the private sphere goes from being this place where children could priorly be safe and priorly have peace and a space to grow and develop as well-rounded humans and adults, into a place that pummels them with fear. Think about it. If you were a child and you're exposed to the worst that humanity has to offer, how does this give you a good springboard into adult life? How will you go into adult life with any sense of purpose or any sense of hope for humanity and your own life, and how to view yourself as part of a species that is dignified? You wouldn't, because you've just been viewing the worst of our nature all the time. You're not encouraged to be calm and to grow your character and interact with your family inside the house and maybe local communities around, and learn how to kind of grow your character and learn how to be witty and kind and how to interact socially. You're just being sort of encouraged to be this fearful ghost who just sort of glides around in the outside world, afraid of everything. And so what does this mean? Was TV a net benefit for our society, or do the costs outweigh the benefits? For me, the answer is clear. The cost of television outweighs the entertainment value that it provides. The home should be a fortress. It's a sacred space, and it shouldn't be infiltrated by the outside world. We should be extremely cautious about what we let inside the home. We should be moderate. I think a moderate position is probably that if you do have a TV in the home, it should only be on for a very short amount of time in a week. I don't think that especially children should be sat in front of a TV just watching it all the time. The temptations for them and the emotional manipulation on television programs and in the news media is not something healthy for a growing child, and it's not healthy for your relationships either with other family members. And so television should be absolutely limited. But that's me. That's the conclusion that I've come to. I don't own a television. I still have handheld devices and a laptop, but I'm trying to limit my time on those as well, because it's the same story. And so what about other technologies? What does this apply? Does this same reasoning apply to other technologies? And the answer is probably yes. And so it's like, how do we decide then, as Britain, in the new Britain we want, how do we decide what technologies we keep and what goes? Well, there is no body, there's no person who holds office who decides this technology is not in the common good, it's not useful to our citizens, so we're going to ban it or get rid of it. There is no office or person who can decide on that. And there isn't probably going to be in the long run. I would like to see something like that put in place, because I think an office of somebody who overseas technology might help us. The reason being is that right now I feel like we're on a speed train where the The culture just accepts any technology as it comes along, and we're all on this speed train of technology. None of us can get off it. I recently talked to somebody who wanted to get into their gym, and they had to have a smartphone with an app on it. So it's not like they can just decide not to use a smartphone and go and gain access to the gym in another way. They're being forced to adopt a smartphone, this new technology, in order just to do the basic things of life that they want to do. So it's not like we can get off and stop using these technologies. We're all on board this train, and there's nobody in the control of the train, and there's no one to press the brake if we decide that the train is going to lead us off the tracks as a society. That's not a position I want to be in. I don't think it's good for our nation, and it would be better if we had an office that decided over technology. However, that's not going to happen. So what can we do as individuals and communities? Well, it's like I have said, I choose to restrict my time on my smartphone. I don't have a television. As an individual, you have a duty to weigh up the pros and cons of the things that come your way and decide whether they are actually good for you. Unfortunately, that might mean that it might be years before you realize the negatives of a certain piece of technology. That's evident with social media and smartphones now, is we all just adopted them, and we're only now figuring out that it wasn't really good for us in some ways. That's all you can do as an individual. You have to decide for yourself what you will accept and moderate your behavior and moderate the ways this technology can come into your home. Another way that might be useful is, as individuals, we are alone, and therefore it is easier for us to fall off our path that we have chosen. So if you're trying not to watch television, you're just an individual on your own, and it's difficult when you're on your own. You feel like you're just alone and you're fighting against everyone else, and they're tempting you all the time to try and adopt television or another piece of technology. But if you have a community of people around you who are like-minded, who think like you and also want to limit their time on television and go and do other things that are more useful and for the human spirit, like socialization or some project, then it might be easier for you to keep up this goal and this path that you're on. So I would suggest that one of the ways is that we can build local communities for now and moderate the technologies and talk about the technologies that come our way and decide whether we should actually use them or not. So that's kind of where I want to end this video. I want to say that this doesn't have to veer into the opposite extreme. We're at the extreme now where we just adopt everything without question in the technological sphere. I'm not talking about rejecting everything technologically and just going back to the Stone Age. I want to be in the middle. The middle is often the virtuous middle ground between two extremes. I don't want to reject technological advance, and I don't want to reject existing technologies completely. I want to choose ones that I think are positive and reject other ones that I think the negatives outweigh the positives. And that's important to keep in mind. Even though I've talked here a lot about the negatives of technology, in particular television, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a technophobe or I'm a Luddite, and that means we should just get rid of all of these techs. No, I think some can be used for positives. It's about moderation and balance and being centered and grounded in what's appropriate. And so thank you for listening, and I hope this gives you something to think about.